In my previous life, I lived to be 76 years old. I thought my family was whole, with no regrets. But it wasn't until James Carter, my husband, died that the truth hit me. At his funeral, his lawyer announced that all his property would be left to his beloved Sophie and none of it would go to me. That's when I realized James's feelings for this niece of his, who had called him uncle for most of her life, were never just familial. After struggling to piece my heart back together, I decided to sue Sophie for encroaching on what had once been the shared property between James and me. When my son heard, he locked me in the house and warned, "Dad never really loved you in this life." All he could give Aunt Sophie was his cold fortune. "Mom, if you keep fighting, just pretend you never had a son like me." Hearing that, from a son who looked exactly like his father, I fainted out of rage. And when I opened my eyes again, I found myself reborn in the 1970s, where everything had just begun. In this life, I don't want a husband or a son. "Mom, I want you to stay home with me. You're not allowed to go to work." The moment I opened my eyes, my son Oliver Carter was tugging at the hem of my clothes with a stubborn look on his face. When I didn't respond, he looked up at me, his eyes turning red. That old, familiar heartache came flooding back. But the moment I remembered his words from the past life, "Just pretend you don't have the son," that heartache curdled into something cold and wild that spread through my body like weeds. I'd always thought I was a good mother. I gave Oliver Carter everything, me time, my patience, even my career. I had willingly quit a well-paying job as a translator and handed it to Sophie. Also, I could give Oliver the perfect childhood. I became a housewife for decades. But after I died, I learned the truth. The reason Oliver hadn't wanted me to work that day was because James Carter had told him, "If your mom goes to work, no one will take you to school, no one will make you breakfast. The other kids will laugh at you and say you're a motherless child." A bitter smile curled at my lips. Father and son, both cut from the same cloth, ungrateful, entitled. Oliver Carter, not everything in this world can be yours just because you throw a tantrum. I worked hard to get that job. Why should I give it up just because you want me a home? I didn't even look at him again. I turned and walked back to my room, locking the door behind me. Oliver stood frozen for a second, then stormed over and started kicking and punching the door. "Bad woman. You're not my mother. I don't want you to be my mother." If this were the old me, I'd have panicked, run out, hugged him, and whispered apologies. But not this time. I'd lived my life for others once. I won't do it again. If you don't want me as your mother, go ask your father for a divorce. I'd be happy to sign the papers. Oliver went silent. He didn't wait for me to come out, just stood outside the door, eyes nervously watching the gate, waiting for James Carter to return. I took a deep breath and slowly touched every old object in the room. When I saw the black and white wedding photo on the wall, I knew this wasn't a dream. I'd really been reborn. That photo, our only photo together, was taken on our wedding day. I lost it in my past life when we moved and mourned it for months. But even then, James never suggested we take a new one. Looking back now, love or the absence of it was always obvious. I heard the sound of familiar footsteps, followed by a cough. My body tensed out of reflex. I almost jumped to my feet. Then I stopped and laughed at myself. This isn't the old life anymore. I quietly opened the door. There stood a younger James Carter in a Zhongshan suit, expression cold and distant. Beside him was a young woman in a red polka dress, Sophie. She looked bright and confident, frowning as she tugged on James's sleeve. "Uncle, Aunt probably didn't mean to leave Oliver outside on purpose. Don't blame her." James's brows knitted in frustration. "Emma Watson, what are you throwing a fit about again? Oliver's still a child, and you left him outside by himself." I glanced at Oliver, who already reached up to James's waist, and scoffed. "He's 9. Are you afraid a beggar will snatch him?" James looked stunned. I talked back. Sophie spoke first. "Aunt, don't say that. It'll make Oliver so sad." I looked straight into Sophie's eyes. She turned away. "I'm his mother," I said. "Why are you the one worried?" Sophie backed off, flustered. I didn't mean." James stepped between us, shielding her. "Why are you arguing with someone younger than you?" I found it laughable. So, James did see Sophie as his junior. But he still kept her close. Now it was clear this wasn't a one-sided infatuation. James coughed again. He used to do that all the time, a signal when he wanted something but didn't want to say it out loud. And I would always rush to serve him. But this time, I looked at him and stepped back, pretending to gag. If you're sick, go to a doctor. Don't pass your germs to me. James's face darkened. You transfer your job to Sophie tomorrow. Don't make me say it again. Sophie gave me an apologetic look, but I could see the pride in her eyes. Aunt, it's not my idea. Uncle insisted. James said, Sophie needs to get a job quickly, or else the neighborhood office will send her to the countryside. I crossed my arms. Going to the countryside as an educated youth is a good thing. She needs a job. Let her find one herself. Why should she take mine? James looked at me, firm. Sophie's image is more suitable. I feel more comfortable with her doing that job. And look at you, you still want to be a translator? I looked down at my clothes, rough and worn, but clean. After all these years, whenever there was something good, I thought first of that father and son. I never thought of myself. I wore the same clothes over and over, as long as they didn't fall apart. If my clothes were torn, I just patched them up with whatever I had. I slowly exhaled and said firmly, I'm not giving up my job for Sophie. The moment she sensed the tension in the room, Sophie quickly stepped in. It's fine, Uncle. I don't need Aunt's job. But James Carter's eyes darkened, his tone threatening. If you insist on keeping that job, then let's divorce. And Oliver will stay with me. James stared at me with those sharp, cold eyes, and Oliver, standing beside him, lifted his chin in defiance. Bad woman, if you want a divorce, I don't want you to be my mother. It was obvious James thought I'd back down because of Oliver. After all, I was an orphan. What right did I have to break apart a family when I never had one of my own? Sure enough, the next moment, he softened his tone and said, Emma Watson, do you know how painful it is for a child to grow up without a father or mother? Do you really want Oliver to end up like you, alone and unloved? I tilted my head slightly and pointed at Sophie. Isn't there someone who can't wait to play the role of his new mother? James stiffened, his expression flickering with panic before he snapped. Why are you always bringing up Sophie? You're just jealous. I almost laughed. James Carter really had a talent, could turn anything I said into a crime within 3 sentences. I didn't bother to argue. I went back to my room, grabbed some cash and a couple of cloth coupons, and headed to the supply and marketing cooperative. James had mocked me earlier for wanting to be a translator, but it would indeed be a shame if I didn't even own 1 or 2 decent outfits for the job. After buying fabric, I visited Aunt Cara, our neighbor known for her excellent tailoring. Miss Emma, she said as she measured me, I heard the yelling next door. Are you really going to divorce your husband? He's a soldier, handsome, decent pay. You sure about this? I nodded. No matter how much he earns or how good he looks, if his heart isn't with me, it's not worth it. Aunt Cara paused, glanced around, then whispered in my ear. Well, I doubt your husband will file for divorce. His superior, from what I've heard, despises men who abandon their wives for younger women. If James files for divorce now, his career might be over. My heart sank. If that was true, this was going to get complicated. As I walked back home, my mind was a whirlwind. Just as I reached the doorstep, I heard Sophie crying inside. Uncle, Aunt won't give me the job. I never meant to take it from her. It's just that Oliver is still young. Doesn't she care more about being a mother? I even offered to pay her 10 yuan every month. The door was slightly ajar. I saw James Carter holding Sophie, gently wiping away her tears. Sophie, listen to me, he said softly. Even if she won't give it up, I'll make sure you get the job. You don't have to pay her.
Keep the salary.
Buy yourself some flowers. Then he turned to Oliver, handing him a small packet of powder. Here, Oliver. When the time comes, mix this into your mother's drink. Oliver looked confused. Dad, what is it? James made a warm, almost kind expression that sent chills down my spine. It's medicine. It'll make Mom quiet. Oliver clapped his hands excitedly. That's awesome. Mom's been so annoying lately. I wish she'd just stop talking forever. I was frozen in place. Sophie's face showed a flicker of hesitation. She looked at James and said shyly, Uncle, isn't this too much? James patted her head. Only someone who can't talk can't be an interpreter. But it's fine. As long as she behaves, takes care of Oliver, I'll make sure she has food. She won't starve. Sophie's eyes sparkled. Uncle, you're so good to me. Watching the two of them act out their little drama made me feel physically sick. In my past life, I had been nothing more than a housekeeper to them, running the home for decades without complaint. And now, just because I wanted to keep my job, they were ready to take my voice away and keep me like some obedient servant as if that were some kind of favor. Did I owe these three people something in my last life? I looked up at the sky, blinking back tears. Then I quietly left the yard and ran straight to the leader's office. Comrade Leader, if I remember correctly, do we still have one more spot for overseas assignment? The leader saw me and immediately stood up. Comrade Emma Watson, please have a seat. I thought you didn't want to go abroad because of your husband and child. I shook my head. That was then. Now I want to serve the country. If it means sacrificing my small family, so be it. Besides, it's clear they don't need me. I want to file for divorce with James Carter so I can focus on my work. The leader wiped the sweat from his brow. Comrade Emma, your dedication is admirable. But if you're divorcing for this, I'd feel responsible. As the saying goes, better to destroy 10 temples than one marriage. I took a sip of the tea he offered, then quietly told him every filthy thing between James Carter and Sophie. When I finished, the leader looked at me long and hard, sympathy in his eyes. He sighed. I'll handle this personally. You don't need his permission. I'll file the divorce with higher-ups myself. There's a team heading abroad, soon you can join them in 2 days. I stood and bowed deeply. Thank you, leader. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Comrade Emma, your language ability is exceptional. Frankly, you're a genius. Serve the country well. I nodded. Yes. For the motherland. When the divorce was officially granted, I finally felt the weight in my chest lift. I could breathe again. Later that day, when I returned home, Oliver Carter ran up to me with a bright smile. Mom, I got 100 on my test today. I looked at the score on his test paper. It had obviously been altered. I smiled faintly. In the living room, James Carter and Sophie sat side by side, pretending nothing had happened. But there was something off in their expressions and expectant flicker in their eyes, as if waiting for something to happen. I curled my lips into a smile, bent down, and patted Oliver Carter's head. Well done. What reward do you want? Oliver beamed, clearly proud of himself. He ran to the table, picked up a glass of water, and brought it to me. Mom, I don't want a reward. The teacher said we should be filial. You've worked hard. Have a drink. I picked up the glass. The water looked clear, just plain boiled water. But from the corner of my eye, I caught a flicker of tension. James Carter and Sophie, who had been quietly watching from the side, suddenly sat up straighter, eyes fixed on me. I raised the glass, paused, then slowly set it down. Without a word, I walked over to James and handed it to him. My son poured me some water. I'm not thirsty. You drink it. James's face stiffened. I'm not thirsty either, he muttered. I pulled out a handkerchief and gently wiped the sweat from his forehead. Not thirsty? Then why are you sweating so much? James lowered his eyes and said nothing. I smiled at him, then turned to Sophie. Since you're not thirsty either, why don't we give it to Sophie? She looks like she could use a drink. At that, James suddenly sprang to his feet and slapped the glass from my hand. It shattered on the floor, shards catching the light. If you don't want to drink it, why force others? He snapped. I clapped my hands. Why? Because you drugged it. Isn't that right, my dear husband? James's eyes flashed with panic, but he turned away and lifted his chin. I have no idea what you're talking about. Sophie gave a strained smile. And didn't Oliver pour that water for you? I don't know what you misunderstood, but Uncle would never. I cut her off, my voice like ice. I don't doubt him. I just know the truth that you are about to make me mute. James slammed his hands on the table. So you knew everything. You were just toying with me. I stepped closer, meeting his angry gaze. And, what? You're allowed to poison me, but I'm not allowed to turn the game around. I'm not giving up this job. I earned it. I passed the exam. Why should I hand it over to her? Sophie's eyes welled with tears. Aunt, I turned and pointed at her, my voice razor-sharp.
You.
If anything had happened to me, you'd be an accomplice. Do you even feel guilty eating the benefits of someone else's blood and tears? In my previous life, after I gave her the job, she became a rising star and independent woman celebrated all over Jiangcheng. Compared to her, James only grew more disgusted with me. Oliver Carter, too, began to admire Sophie more than his own mother. He insisted she attend every parent-teacher meeting, claiming I'd embarrass him. People thought they were the real couple. Later, after the economic reforms, Oliver started his own business and became wildly successful. Meanwhile, I faded into the background, the invisible housemaid of the family. Thinking about it all, my chest tightened. I turned back to James. We've been married 12 years. Most of my salary has gone straight into your pocket or your mother's. The money I was given barely covered basic expenses. I've managed to save just over 100 yuan. If we divorce, I want half of everything. 2,000 yuan minimum. Write me an IOU if you can't pay now. James's face twisted in rage. You really want to divorce me? After all I've done for you? You want that much money? My money belongs to Sophie and Oliver. I've supported you all these years, and now you want to cut? I shrugged, unfazed. You don't have to pay now, but I will collect. I turned to leave. Behind me, James's voice followed like poison. Emma Watson, you forced me into this. I walked next door and knocked on Aunt Kara's door. Aunt, I remember you said you had a spare room. Can I stay just one night? I'll pay 50 cents. Aunt Kara opened the door and lit up when she saw me. Sister Emma, what money? You paid me generously for the clothes I made. Stay as long as you like. I smiled and picked up the 2 new dresses. Not to brag, Aunt, but when I wear these abroad, I'll look like a real fashion icon. Aunt Kara blinked in surprise. Abroad? You're going? I nodded.
Yes.
Tomorrow. She slapped her thigh in excitement. Oh my, I'll be able to say I know someone who studied overseas. Then she paused, looking at me strangely. I smiled, pulled out an envelope, and handed it to her. Aunt, when I leave, please deliver this to James Carter's superior. She accepted it solemnly and tucked it away. The next morning, I dressed neatly and stood in front of James's house, waiting for the car. I had given James's address as the pickup point for the leadership team. They should arrive any minute. Mom, I heard a hesitant voice behind me. I turned. Oliver stood there, covered in dirt, his usually neat clothes wrinkled and stained. Mom, please don't go. Come back. Sister Sophie's food tastes awful, and she doesn't know how to wash my clothes. His words stung, but not with love-only irony. You want me to come back? To be your nanny again? Oliver Carter, you're 9 years old. You know the difference between a mother and a maid. Think carefully. Who am I to you, really? He opened his mouth, eyes like big black grapes, brimming with tears. But I didn't waver. Maybe because I knew deep down he was just like James, ungrateful. Emma Watson. James approached, his face conflicted. He's your son. You carried him for 10 months. Don't you have a heart? I smiled faintly. Just as I opened my mouth to reply suddenly, pain exploded in my neck. I stumbled forward. I turned, my vision blurring. Sophie was behind me, holding a thick wooden stick. Aunt, don't blame me, she whispered. You were in the way. As I collapsed, I heard James Carter's voice calmly say, Sophie, don't blame yourself. She brought this on herself. If she had just given you the job from the beginning and stayed home to take care of Oliver, none of this would have happened, James Carter muttered coldly. Pack your things. When the car arrives, I'll say she gave the job to you willingly. Sophie was so touched that she hugged James on the spot. Oliver looked between the two of them, his father, the woman in his arms, and then at me, lying on the floor, blood pouring from my forehead. He pressed his lips together, confused, uncertain. When I woke up again, I was tied to a chair with thick hemp rope. My limbs were numb. There was a greasy rag stuffed in my mouth that reeked of leftover meat and old oil. I gagged from the stench, unable to cry out. Outside the door, I heard James Carter's voice. My wife wants to stay at home and take care of our son. As for the overseas assignment, I'd like to recommend my niece Sophie as a replacement. What? Someone responded. The leader didn't tell us that. Isn't this a bit sudden? Where's Comrade Emma Watson? Sophie's nervous voice rang out. Unfortunately, my aunt fell ill recently and had to go to the hospital. She won't be able to meet you. But this is her decision. I'm her niece. I can speak on her behalf. The officials hesitated. The leader holds Comrade Emma Watson's translation ability in high regard. Isn't it inappropriate to change candidates at the last minute? James scoffed and patted his chest. Emma doesn't have much skill. She only learned English by secretly listening to the tapes I bought for Sophie. Sophie's level is far better. I struggled in the chair, staring at the sunlight filtering in through the window. I wanted to scream, to fight, but I couldn't make a sound. Then came the words that made my heart plummet. All right then. Comrade Sophie, grab your luggage. Come with us. Despair bloomed in me like 1,000 weeds. Was this how it would end again? Even after rebirth, I couldn't change my fate? Just as I was about to give up, I heard a thunderous voice outside. Comrade James, why am I only now hearing that Emma Watson is your wife? It was the leader. James laughed awkwardly. What do you mean, leader? Of course she's my wife. We've been married for years, just ask the neighbors. Aunt Cara spat at his feet. Bah. Aren't you disgusted saying that? Leader, you need to stand up for Emma Watson. She left my house this morning perfectly fine. They're hiding her, trying to replace her with that niece. The leader's face turned grim. He waved his hand, and several guards stormed the house. Moments later, they dragged me out, still tied up, blood crusted on my forehead. Gasps rose from the crowd. I never would have believed it, someone whispered. James Carter always acted like a gentleman, but look what he did to his wife. Just look at Emma's head, she's clearly hurt. And Sophie, someone added, she's not even his late comrade's widow. The way she looks at him. This whole thing is dirty. James's face drained of color. His carefully constructed reputation collapsed in an instant. Emma Watson, he said hoarsely, say something. I spat the foul rag from my mouth and glared at him. You and I have nothing left to say. What do you want me to explain? James and Sophie exchanged uneasy glances. The leader stepped forward and handed me a document. Comrade Emma Watson, this is your expedited divorce certificate. Please confirm. I accepted it and gave the leader a sincere smile. Thank you. I'll never forget what the organization has done for me. Then I turned to James and tossed the certificate at his feet. See for yourself. He picked it up with trembling hands, his eyes wide in disbelief. Emma. Are you joking? You even faked a divorce certificate? Sophie rushed in, trying to smooth things over. Aunt, don't be like this. You shouldn't get angry with Uncle. Apologize, let's move on. The leader's face hardened. Comrade Emma, your past judgment clearly wasn't very sharp. I nodded calmly. Yes, I used to have vision problems. But they've been cured. The leader laughed. Good. There are plenty of good men among our comrades heading abroad. If you take a liking to one of them, I'd be happy to help. I shook my head politely. Thank you, but I want to focus on serving the organization. James watched all this unfold, panic creeping up his spine. Something had slipped out of his control. He bolted inside and returned with Oliver in tow. Emma Watson. So now Watyuri leaving your son, too. Oliver kept his head low. Dad, it's no use. I don't think she wants us anymore. James slapped the back of his head. Don't talk nonsense. I looked at my son, finally mature, but too late. In my past life, I gave him everything. And what did he give me? Rejection. Contempt. Now that I didn't want him, he finally understood what I had endured. I spoke coldly. Don't you understand plain language? The divorce has been filed. I don't want either of you. Oliver Carter is your son. You keep him. James stared at me as if seeing me for the first to me, a stranger, sharp-edged and distant. Just because I asked you to give your job to Sophie, you want a divorce and run abroad? I laughed without warmth. Just because? That's what you call it? That job earned with my ability, you think it means nothing. James's jaw clenched, veins bulging. Just because I'm your husband. I raised the certificate high. Not anymore. Turning to the leader, I said, let's go. Don't waste another minute on me. The leader nodded, and we headed toward the vehicle. Suddenly, James shouted, "Emma, if you apologize now, I'll still." I stopped him. "Don't forget the 2,000 yuan. If you pay in full today, I'll give you a 200 yuan discount." James froze, as if something vital had been torn out of him. Sophie stood beside him, eyes wide, watching as I stepped into the car, leaving the two of them behind. James Carter stepped forward to block the leader. "Leader, Sophie's translation level is no worse than Emma Watson's. Let her go, too." Sophie glanced at the leader with hopeful eyes, but the leader looked straight at me. I curled my lips, turned to Sophie, and said slowly, "Everything is possible." Sophie blinked, confused. What do you mean?" She turned to James Carter, silently begging for help. But what could James do? He didn't even understand what the sentence meant. 2 minutes passed. She still stood there in silence. The leader had already made up his mind about her ability. I gave a mocking smile. "Everything is possible, but it's impossible for your English level to be better than mine." Sophie's eyes reddened. She shouted, voice cracking, "Emma Watson, what do you mean? You only know English because you eavesdropped on my tapes and read my books behind my back." I shrugged, calm. "Those tapes and books were bought with shared household money. Why shouldn't I use them? Besides, you fall asleep the moment you hear English, and your books are cleaner than your face. You? Sent abroad? Ridiculous." James Carter turned toward Sophie, his expression darkening. "Sophie, didn't you say you'd been studying hard?" Sophie opened her mouth but couldn't speak. She had nothing to say. All that was left behind for them was the roar of the engine and a trail of dust. As for May, was off to chase a life that truly belonged to me. 5 years passed. While abroad, my language skills improved rapidly. I didn't stop at English. I taught myself French, Japanese, Italian, and more. Just like the leader said, I truly did have a gift for languages. Of course, I never forgot the ideals that sent me there. Once I felt I had learned enough, I returned to China and entered the diplomatic service. With my broad knowledge and outstanding performance in international relations, I rose through the ranks to become the first female director of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. My career flourished. To repay Aunt Car, the one who gave me shelter when I had nothing, I helped her open her own tailor shop. She built her own business at the age of 60 and became an inspiration in her own right. And James Carter? Sophie? After I left that day, Aunt Cara delivered the envelope to James Carter's superior, just as I asked. Inside, there wasn't a single accusation, only love letters Sophie had secretly written to James. Turns out, they had been having an affair behind my back long before I realized it. The superior was furious. Both James and Sophie were court-martialed and sent to a re-education farm in the Northwest for immoral conduct. Sophie didn't even get to go as an educated youth. She went straight into hard labor. James was fined 2,000 yuan from his savings, which was sent to me as compensation. I donated every penny to charity. I couldn't stand the thought of touching James Carter's money. As for Oliver Carter, didn't go with them. Perhaps James had a flicker of conscience left. He placed an announcement in the newspaper officially severing the father-son relationship. Oliver was adopted by a distant relative who had no children. But a year later, that family gave birth to a biological son, leaving Oliver unwanted again. I heard his life hasn't gone well since. But when I received the news, I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel joy. It was like reading someone else's tragedy from a distance. Now, my life is dedicated to my country. I speak for my homeland on the world stage, representing something far greater than myself. The pain and betrayal of my past life, they feel like ancient dust, blown away with time. Director Emma, my assistant, called softly. "You have a 3 p.m. conference call." I nodded, took a sip of my coffee, and glanced down at the diplomatic brief on my desk. Outside, the sun filtered through the window, warm and golden. The world felt new. Everything was full of life. Everything was possible in my own terms this time.